All right, hey guys, it's Brad Sundberg in the studio with MJ. Man, I'm actually really excited. I don't think the four of us have been like in the same place, virtual or actual, probably since 1985,
Right.
1995, 95. Probably at a Japanese restaurant where we ate too much and drank too much and had a really good time. But I want to do a little tribute to the History album 30th anniversary. It's amazing. It's been 30 years, and I brought three of the my fellow studio rats back together in one place, and we're just gonna have a conversation. So I've got Tony Black, Rob Hoffman, and Matt Forger. Um, I'm going to have each of you guys just do a quick little 20-30 second introduction of who you are and what you've been doing since 1995. So, Tony, go ahead.
Me first. Okay. Yeah. I've been still in the recording music industry game since the MJ session, since 95, and went on to do a bunch of projects. One of them being my most prominent one being the Alicia Keys Diary of Alicia Keys album, and a whole bunch of hip hop and R&B. Then I went into being like a independent producer, an independent studio guy, and still doing it to this day somehow. I have no idea. I have no prediction in the world would have said to me that I would have still been doing this now. Now I have a YouTube channel doing some
Right.
of it also.
Give it a shout out.
It's Tony Black NYC. That's it.
Awesome. Go follow Tony Black NYC.
Yeah, check it out.
Mr. Hoffman, the doctor is in the house. What have you been up to?
So I stayed in music for a while. I went on to produce and write the big projects I worked on. I helped Christina Aguilera get her record deal and worked on the first three records, and then kind of semi-retired from music. I still work a little bit here and there with friends and songwriters. But for the last 15 years, I've been in Chinese medicine. I'm doing cancer research, and I'm the president and CEO of a university here in Los Angeles.
Such humility. Dude, I'm proud of you. That's
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you.
And Mr. Matt Forger, you and I go back to a project called Captain EO, if I'm not mistaken, but reintroduce yourself.
Well, I actually started with Michael on that album that was the kind of got the ball rolling, which was Thriller. And I kind of worked on everything after that with uh, the only one that I didn't work on was We Are the World because I had a commitment with Bruce that didn't let me uh, beyond that. But all the rest of the albums I was on up until the change of the millennia. And, I just got to work with Michael and yourself and these guys that it's so good to see after so long. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're all together and many other just amazing, talented individuals. And this is one of those, how do you how do we even start to describe, the amazing collection of people that
Right.
have worked with Michael over the years and that we've all, in some way shared the same breathe the same air in the same studios. It's just been an amazing experience.
Awesome. So I do have a bunch of questions that people have submitted, but I don't want to just do Q&A. So I'm going to kind of mix questions in while we chat here. But start out with, and I think what's cool, I thought about this today, is two of us, just so happens that me and Matt are on the right side of my screen. Two of us had been with Michael for a while and kind of stayed with Michael for a while. And then my two New Yorkers, of course, Rob lives in LA now, but Tony and Rob, this was really your first dip into MJ world. So I think it's going to be kind of a cool, four different perspectives. Tony and Matt are still very active, still in the industry. Rob has wisely moved on, and I've moved on for the most part. I build home theaters and build crazy music systems, and then I do this little thing called In the Studio with MJ, and get to go on little trips every now and then. So what I want to do is I'm going to start with Tony, kind of put Tony back on the spot again, about how your first impressions of being tossed onto the History album, just and kind of from a studio perspective. Talk a little bit about the studio, what it was like, and kind of your first encounters with Michael.
Listen, when the project first came to the Hit Factory, I'd only been there a few months as a sort of an assistant engineer, and then all of a sudden I got put into doing some hip hop engineering sessions, which was like just starting to percolate in early '94. And you guys had started January of '94, I believe. And I
Right.
was like, it was an exclusive club. Like no one was allowed in there or anywhere near there. I knew Rob because we had both started at the Hit pretty much at the same time. Maybe Rob was there a week or two earlier than me or something. But I remember getting the call in the middle of the night one night from Danielle at the Hit Factory saying, "You're starting on the Sherman project tomorrow morning." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Yeah, so and so didn't work out, and you're next." So I show up and I met you, Brad, that day,
Okay.
and you gave me the briefing. It was like, "Listen, take it easy on this." I'll never forget it. You're like, just be cool, just be chill, just be this. So I was like, I had no idea what I was even remotely going to see. You know,
Right.
it was a big mystery. And so I was nervous a little bit, but also sort of like I had nothing to lose either. And I knew Rob in there and I knew Brian a little bit, not
Right.
real well. But I remember going in and just saying to myself, like, yeah, this is not the same as what I've been seeing. What is all this gear? And
Right.
then the first thing I kind of saw was Brad Buxer in Studio 3, surrounded by a mountain of gear, old Macintosh monitors and an MPC 60, and just this laboratory kind of feel to things. Andrew Shep's over at like the synclavier thing or whatever doing some shit. And like it was very like informal. And I think because I was the guy who was coming in as the extra,
Right.
I think that I was sort of a little bit like at hand's length, like you don't know if this guy's going to last either, because I think one or two guys before me had got bounced. So I felt like, all right, I'll just hang out. And then I just got to see the process. But everyone was so like professional was like the only way I could describe it, is that there was an air of like something big was happening. Bruce had his domain in Studio 4, and that was like a whole nother world. Um, it felt like you were like leaving New York City every time you went behind those doors, and
Right.
in a bunker. It didn't matter where you were. You could have been anywhere. That was my first impressions. I mean, I hope that I don't want to get too long-winded on you.
Right. Well, and I almost, in a sense, I almost should have started with Rob because Rob was there just before you.
Yeah.
Rob, when did you first? Tony, do you remember what month you walked in?
June.
It was June. Okay.
Yeah.
Rob, what about you? Kind of your first impressions of jumping into that project?
Um, I mean, it was overwhelming, but also like totally cool. Like I had actually, I don't even know if I ever told you guys this story, but like when I was in college, I sat with my guidance counselor. This is like August before I met you. And he's like, what's your plan? What are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I'm going to get a job at a big studio in New York City and I want to work with Bruce Swedian. And the guy's like, what? And I'm like, yeah,
Really?
I want to work with Bruce Swedian and Jam and Lewis and like learn like those are my three guys and I want to be with them and I want to learn how they make records and that's and whatever the artists are doesn't even matter, but I want to be with Bruce. And then that's August of 93 '93. In February of '94, I'm with Swedian. So it was like, I mean, it's pretty mind blowing to even think about. But in those early days, it was just us, this crew. In the first couple months was not even with Michael, so it was Bruce and Renee, and either Brad or Matt, Brian, and then we brought Tony in. You know, Tony's leaving out the crucial part of that story is that
Right.
the air conditioner was broken that first
I
day,
was
and he
going to mention
actually
that. Yeah.
he actually walked into Studio 3 and
Yeah.
Bucks are sitting there topless,
Yep. Sweating,
sweating.
eating like a lobster tail. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? You know what I mean?
and
Like,
I and I was so tired. I was like, "See you, dude. Good luck. I'll see you in the morning."
yeah,
And I was just gone.
yeah,
So, I mean, there's so many moments like that, but I think like Tony, you kind of surprised me in that like the coolest part of of this whole thing was like how cool everybody was,
yeah,
like the sign from the We Are the World days of check your egos out the door must still have been up there because it was like, hey, you're here, just work hard and like everything's fine, and it was just such a cool place to be. And from where
Right.
Tony and I were before that, like, a lot of the sessions at Hit Factory had a lot of alcohol and drugs, and they were kind of like a madhouse sometimes.
yeah.
So to walk into that session, it was like you're leaving New York, but you're also like, it's all about creativity. It's all about making music and supporting each other and supporting Michael, of course. So it was just like it was like an incredible place to be,
Right.
and hard to ever recapture or impossible to ever
Impossible.
recapture.
Totally. I mean, Bruce, Matt, and Brad and Eddie were like the adults in the you know what I mean? Like in that and but it never made us feel like we were idiots. It wasn't like you don't know what you're doing. You didn't work on Thriller or Bad or something like that. You know what
Right.
I mean? It was like respectful. Like Bruce never came in with like an attitude. It was like, oh, you're here. Go ahead. Go in the room. Get something done. Um, who knew that it was going to be have that much of an effect on all of us? I had no idea.
The first question is what's your most cherished memory from the history sessions? Matt, I'm going to start with you.
There are so many individual moments, and we've all had them. For me personally, um, there was the time when we were in Studio One with the orchestra, and who was conducting that day? Um, the this the song was "Smile."
Yeah, no, I know who it was Jeremy
Dude,
Lubbock.
It's
Jeremy
Jeremy
Lubbock.
Lubbock, and on the piano that day
Well, probably David Foster,
it was David Foster on the piano.
because why not?
Well, no, I mean that was a very appropriate move because who else other than David Foster has that sensibility of just this is how it's going to work. It's
Right.
going to be beautiful, and it's absolutely was between Jeremy Lubbock and David Foster. So several takes go down, and Michael is singing live in the vocal booth, and David Foster's in yet another booth on an acoustic piano. And how many pieces were the orchestra that day? 60,
That
70?
was that was a big one. Yeah,
It
That
was
was the
big.
big, yeah, that was
it might
probably
have
the
even been
biggest.
like 90 or 105. I mean, it was a big
It
orchestra.
could have been. It was the biggest string section date of the project. And after take four, five, I don't know, after a number of takes, and I'm in the control room, I'm in the room with Bruce, and I think B was there that day, and Brian Vibberts, and we're in the room. Michael's listened to a playback, and then they say, okay, we're going to do another one. Michael leans into me very quietly, and he says, get the camera and come with me. So I nonchalantly picked up the little video camera and walked out of the room. Followed him through the live room with the orchestra into the vocal booth and just hit record. And he proceeded to sing what became the live take. I think it was take five. The live take that was actually the take that was the one that was used on the record.
Hmm.
And to me, it was like he knew that was going to be the take.
Right.
It was like there was this thing that was going on, but it was I got to be in the booth with Michael singing the tape, videotaping me. And I was, to me, it was like, hey, it's another day in the office, you know?
Right.
I mean, as we all know, you walk in and it's another day at work, and who knows what you're going to face and what's going to unfold. And then now in hindsight, you look back and you go, oh my God, that was one of the most incredible musical moments in pop music. It's one of those rarities. That was probably one
Right.
that was the most memorable in a very, very favorable way.
Rob, what would be an amazing moment for you on the history?
I mean, sitting next to Michael while he sang Much Too Soon. That qualifies. That was insane. Sitting in
You,
the
you,
room,
you were out in the
like,
studio with him
no, he sat at the console.
and
Who's the
just
guitar
held a
player?
mic
Jeff Molina, was that his name? I can't remember. New York session player was in Studio 3 in the live room
hmm
playing acoustic guitar, and then Bruce sat in the center of the console. Michael sat next to him, and I sat next to Michael, and he just sat there with an SM57 and sang like five takes of Much Too Soon or something. I mean, it was like,
He wanted to sing in the control room.
yeah, I was like, what? How did I get here? Like, what? You know, that was insane. Same room, having Janet and Michael singing backgrounds together on Scream with Jimmy Jam, like my hero to this day,
Right.
sitting there with Jimmy and Terry, like watching them construct background vocals and Michael and Janet singing together. I mean, those moments are, that stuff's priceless. Like
I
there's
mean, just break
nothing
that
that
down
even
for a
comes
minute.
close.
What was, where were they? What was that session like?
Studio 3. I mean
Okay.
the Scream. We were in Studio 3 in New York, and that was that was the room. That was Buxer's room. That was the primary room where all the session musicians would come in. And we kind of broken down Brad for a minute, right? And we were moving on to David and Jimmy and Terry and all of this stuff. And first, Brad and I had gone a few days before. We were up in Studio 1 playing that DAT tape that had a bunch of tracks from Janet, Jimmy, and Terry for Michael. That was kind of the audition, right? He
Right.
had asked Janet for some tracks, and Jimmy and Terry showed up with this tape. One of which was ends up being Scream. The other one was actually Runaway, which was Janet's next single off
Hmm.
that greatest hits. So it's interesting. We were the first ones to hear that track. Um, so anyway, he decides on Scream, and they had come back to do the background vocals with Michael and Janet singing on a single mic, doubling each other, and Jimmy sitting in the studio with a keyboard, coming up with the chords and the parts and just giving them notes.
Man.
And they just doubled each other so tight you can't even tell like who's who. And then the really funny part is it comes to that lyric that says "Stop fucking with me,"
Right.
stop pressuring me, stop pressuring me, stop fucking with me. And Michael's like, "I'm not singing that. I don't say that word." And Janet's like, "What?" It's like nobody can tell. And they had to like convince him to like, make it like super percussive so he didn't have to
Right.
say the word, but I think Janet probably went in later and really, put the emphasis on that. But I mean, to me, like being a Jam and Lewis fan, being a Michael fan and a Bruce fan and Janet, of course, it was just, I'm like, I'm done. Like, what do I have to do
Where do you go?
anymore? Like where do you go after this? Like, it's all pretty pointless at this
Now, did
point.
they do the lead? Did they do the verses? I thought Janet did her
They
verses in Minneapolis.
She went back to Minneapolis
Okay.
because even if Michael Jackson is your brother, do you want to sing lead vocals next to him?
Huh.
So they went back to Minneapolis and did it there. And I think the story after that I've heard Jimmy tell after is um, that after Michael heard Janet's vocal in Minneapolis, Jimmy says that Michael flew to Minneapolis at some point to re-sing his leads because he liked what they had done there.
Oh,
I
really?
don't remember that, but that's kind of Jimmy's memory of it all now.
Okay.
Hmm.
But that's pretty amazing. And post session, of course, is the I've told this story a number of times. Like in the beginning of the session, I was kind of fired for 2 weeks, and I got asked back on the session. So for a while, it was just Vibrants by himself, and that was heavy. But when we were at the wrap party at Neverland, as I was leaving after spending the whole day, we all spent the whole day there, and I went to say goodbye to Michael in the arcade, and he gave me a big hug, and just out of nowhere, he says, "I want you to know I'm sorry."
Wow.
And I was like, "What?" He's like, "I'm so sorry for the beginning of all that when I asked you to leave the session." He's like, "It had nothing to do with you. It had to do with all the stuff I was going through. And I want you to know you're great."
Hmm.
And I'm just like, so
Gosh, crazy.
it's an amazing memory.
That's incredible.
Can I add
Yeah.
a side note to what Rob just said? I don't
Yeah.
even know if Rob is aware of this,
It's about to get
but
real.
Uh,
this is you remember there was a whole lot of stuff going on, and you were asked to leave. You were supposedly kicked off the session.
yep.
And when I found out, um, my job uh, in the position that I had was the highest objective was for the good of the project, for the good of making the best music, the best record that we could. I went into Michael's office, and you remember his room he had for an office, and I sat down with him and I said, Michael, you cannot not have Rob on this project at this point. I said,
Wow.
you have to consider his knowledge, his experience, what he knows about every single song and every single track. He is key and instrumental to understanding moving forward
Right.
in a competent, effective fashion. Now, I know things have gotten crazy, and we all knew why things were getting crazy because there was just insane hours going on working in the studio that got out of control. And I said, look, this is not on Rob, and this is not Rob's fault. It's the pressure that he's been feeling. And I explained a little bit about your situation because you explained to me your situation at an earlier point in time. And I said, please, for the good of this record and the good of this project, we've got to get Rob back. And
Thank
Michael
you for
looked at
that.
me and said, yeah, yeah, I see your point.
Amazing.
And I basically, I had no dog in that fight,
Right.
except what was
Well,
best for the project.
yeah, yeah,
And I mean, it's the rest is history, so to
yeah,
speak.
Yeah.
totally.
Wow.
No, yeah, I know Matt went to bat for Rob, and yeah, I might have been back in LA when some of that went down. But I certainly supported Rob coming back, and same thing getting Tony in. We just had to
We
shore
were
up the
dying.
troops.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
it
were
was
dying. You know,
Yeah.
Tony, I want you to do, what they're asking for, a cherished memory, but
Yeah.
also kind of talk about what you walked into. But start off with maybe a special memory about the project.
Um, I mean, there's obviously many, but there's the main one, of course, that comes to mind is that and I don't know what I don't remember the exact circumstance, but I'd been on the session maybe I'm going to say 2 or 3 months, and so I knew the lay of the land, like the way things were being recorded to analog tape with stereo cue mixes, and you know those were work tapes, I guess they were called, and then like you
Right.
would everything would get compiled to the 3348s. It was like once you wrapped your head around that, sort of with the offsets and all. But anyway, something was coming up. Somebody was getting married, or Eddie was going to a wedding or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what the circumstances were, but Eddie came to me one day and he was like, "Listen, I have to go to this thing, and I think Rob, maybe you were working with Bruce or something was up." And he was like, "If Michael wants to record, you got to record him. So I got to give you I'm going to give you a little run through." And I was like, "All right." You know, he goes, "Brad will be here. He'll be like with him in the booth, giving him notes and stuff like that. He wants to do background vocals." I don't remember what song it was, but what happened was it happened. And,
Right.
it was like, somewhere around 8 o'clock at night, it was like, I'm the only, and I couldn't have an assistant. So I was alone, um, me and Brad. So Michael shows up. Brad goes in the piano into the booth with him, which is, a recording room.
Right.
And so I've got the tape all ready. I got the lights down the whole bit, and everything's ready to go. And honestly, like I'm alone. So I'm talking to myself. I'll
Right.
never forget this, that I'm going like, "All right, Thriller, here we go. This is it. Like, let's see what you got." Like, that was the only way I could get myself. It was the only way I could get myself through the actual event. I was like, I have no one else in the room. Like, what? This is just too weird. You know what I mean? And like, there is Michael Jackson looking at me through the glass with Brad at the piano. And I will say this, like, as fast as you could record him was every track was a take.
Right.
And we were stacking background vocals, and it was just, it wasn't very difficult. It was like, okay, let me do the, Tony, take me back to the chorus. Okay, cool. In, all right, that's good. Stop, go back. Yeah, give me another track. In, okay, record. So it was one of the easier recording sessions ever, you
Right.
because
know.
it's perfect. It's perfect every
Yeah, there was
time.
no like punch me in on this syllable and get me out on that syllable, none of that kind of stuff. And the only thing I had to do at one point, I was like, I need another reel because he went beyond the 20 background vocals or whatever.
Right.
But you know, and then, Brad was in there playing the piano every once in a while and doing his Brad thing where he'd be like, real polite with him and like, okay, you could try this, you could do this. But every note was a take. That
Right.
was nuts. And the other part that was nuts was, working in the dark. You're like, okay, the remote is there, but like, is it there? Because it's super dark. And and then the other part was like talking to myself, which was I was like, all right, Thriller, here we go.
Right.
And then I'd hit the talk back and oh, Michael, you ready? Yeah, we're ready. Okay, okay. All right, Billie Jean, let's make this happen. It was like literally maybe an hour and a half,
Right.
and then
Yeah,
boom,
But okay,
it's
he's
but on
perfect.
a
gone.
by then you'd been on the project for what, 2 months
Yeah, yeah.
approximately. I mean, just tell people the rapport. I mean, how Michael treated you. Were you nervous around him?
I
What?
was not nervous. The only thing I did was had made a mental note to never do a double take. I'd been told that maybe the person before me got bumped because he was like staring or something like that. That was sort of in my head.
Okay.
And but and it was not, listen, I had not been around, I'd been around some big stars by that time, but not Michael Jackson.
Right.
And also, Michael Jackson just popping into a room on you with the sunglasses on and the the door opens up and you look and you're like, you don't want to do that. Like, oh my God, it's Michael Jackson. So I would literally just every time something would happen, I would just kind of be very deliberate and just kind of like not want to freak him out like that. I was like freaked out that it was MJ. But I mean, the other thing was I ran into him in the hallway a couple of times in between studios and just said, hey, what's up?
Right.
And he was like, "Hey, what's going on?" That whole
Yeah.
kind of thing. Then I remember coming in the lounge and everybody going like, "Did you just say, 'Hey, what's up' to Michael?" I was like, "What am I gonna
Oh,
say to him? We're
we
the only
did.
two
We
people in the
did. I don't
hallway."
think we didn't bust on you for that. Maybe for
Uh,
fun.
yeah, yeah. I think Rob did. Or,
I probably
you just
busted
say,
on you. Like, are you talking to Michael?
you just say, "What's up? Hey, what's up?" to Michael. I was like, "Yeah, I mean, we're the only one in the hallway." Like, what am I going to not say hello to him?
All
But
right. We got a million questions.
yeah.
I didn't want this to be a Q and
Wow.
A, but I gotta do something here. I'm gonna throw this one at Matt. Of the songs that made the final cut, which one pushed you to your limits as an engineer? Or all three of you think about it for a second.
Well, there was only one song. I mean, there were several songs on this album that I had initially recorded um, at the beginning of what was to be supposed to be the Decade album.
Right.
It ended up being dangerous, and those songs got shelved. But then it came back and they had their second life and they were completed for history. So there was only one song on the album that I actually spent a lot of studio time working on recording on the history album. And ironically, I did the recording at the Sony studio across the street with Brad Buxer. And that was Stranger in Moscow.
Okay.
And I literally, because Brad and I would work approximately 2 weeks, and then the other guy would relieve and come in. And I remember at that point, it was early in the project. Brad was now in town. He was now on the project, and he had this song. So as I immediately flew into New York, we got into the studio, and I was told, "Oh, and you're going to be working with Brad over across the street," because Sony studios were directly across the street from Hit Factory. So I go, "Okay, fine." So I'm in whatever the second room was at the Sony studio. I forgot what it was called, probably the B room. And it's me and it's Brad. And for that entire 2 week period, we worked on Stranger in Moscow.
Hmm.
And Brad created everything from the tapes that he had done the songwriting with Michael on when they were on the road in the hotel.
Right.
So Michael had a little, or Brad Buxer had this little compact, I think it was the DA88 system of 8 track videotapes. And he had a couple of those machines that he could sync up. And he would be in the hotel room in Moscow working with Michael on the writing of the song and the recording of all of the various parts, arrangement wise and melodic and harmonic and rhythmic components and how they all would fit together. So I got to sit in the studio and work with Brad creating that now on he was recreating it on all of his gear, all of his synthesizers, and his rack of emulator and samplers and stuff. And I was doing everything to the 3348, the digital Sony digitals, and that was a straight run of working every single day for what was my 2 week shift
Right.
in New York. And I remember the very last day of it was who should show up on the scene except Eddie Delana.
Right.
And I said, Eddie, it is so good to meet you because I was getting to leave town and have a little bit of a break from doing the exhausting long hours every single day for the last 2 weeks. And he said, well, what's up and what are we doing? And I gave him the brief rundown and I said, this procedurally, this and that, and this, and Brad. And I don't know if he had previously worked with Brad or not.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
knew each
I think
other.
they were friends.
They were friends at that point?
I think Buxer was the one who kind of picked Eddie.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, and Eddie coming on the project was just he was a great addition to the
Right.
team because he was so laid back and nothing fazed him,
Right.
and he just fit in. It was like he was meant to be that next person joining the team, and he was a great guy to work with. And I was relieved because I had somebody to take over the hot seat and be able to dedicate their full time to engineering because you, Brad, and myself had a lot of other administrative and technical and political issues that we had to deal with on a daily basis to
Yeah, put
keep
political top of the list.
to keep the
Yeah.
as I would explain to people, we greased the skids so that the forward motion
Right.
would never grind to a halt.
Yeah. Tony, kind of same question. Was there a song that sticks out for you as pretty technically challenging?
Technically, um,
Well, technically, interpersonal, whatever.
yeah, I mean the one that I was definitely around for the most was "They Don't Care About Us," or is it "They Don't Really Care About Us"? Um, that thing was like bouncing around in the room for I don't know, could be 6 weeks, as far as I remember. Different guitar players coming in, Slash and Trevor Rabin, and this one and that one to try and play the riff, and that thing, was a test of. It was a bit of an endurance test. I mean,
Right.
there was definitely a little bit of that in that the hours were off the charts and the volume was off the charts a lot of times. Um, I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like that since, and that was that long ago to think about it.
Yeah.
But I do think that session was like the first one that really made subs a requirement in New York. Like there were no subwoofers in rooms in New York until
Right.
that happened.
And
So I mean,
I would
you
say
know,
it's true in LA too.
is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah,
was
so there was no one specific song. The whole thing was a mind blur, mind bending science project at every turn,
right.
because everything was at the edge of technology capabilities. It was like, you know, analog and digital and God, going in the machine room and dealing with those Elcos and like, yeah, we need to like reconfigure the. I was like, that doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and to try and explain to someone that there were these multi-pin things that you had to have kind of like wrap your head around, like, we're going to send this machine to 24 through 25 through 48, and this one's there, and then this needs to come back here, and it's all going to work. Um, those kind of things. So it was never a song by song thing. I think
Right.
that was more on Bruce and you guys than me. I mean, that's for sure.
All right, Rob, same question. There's a story that I'm hoping you're going to tell, but in terms of like a technical challenge
So
for this
many.
project.
I mean, for me, the most technically challenging in the beginning was I recorded the background to Stranger in Moscow up in
Okay.
Studio One, and for whatever reason, I was driving and Eddie was manning the talkback, which was a rare occasion, in those
Yeah.
sessions. And Eddie checked in. He's like, "You cool?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's go." But in this case, Michael was layering vocals, and each take was perfect, but he had different ideas about the percussiveness of words. So he did have me punching in like it's the how does it feel part,
Mm-hmm.
right? He'd get me, he'd be like, "Can you get me in on the third track on the word does and get out before the S?" Like, and he's in the room and Eddie's sitting next to me. He's like, "You sure you're good?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." And it was like, I mean, so we got through that. So that was a challenge, of course. All the orchestra sessions were a challenge because they're just big.
Right.
They're weighty, and without Brian, they would have been a lot harder. But Brian had done so many film scores in that room. It was pretty easy.
Who
But
is
all
the
the
other who is the other guy that we'd bring in for the string dates?
Carl Glanville, who
Carl,
went on
that's
to like
right.
mix and record for U2 and stuff. So yeah,
Right.
those guys, they made it easy. They were like our Tony and mine's kind of senior,
Yep.
guys. And then coming to LA, of course, was recalling the New York mixes at Record One.
Right.
That stuff was tough, and we ended up flying out some of the rental reverb units from the Hit Factory because we couldn't get it
I didn't
perfect.
I forgot that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we rented the EMT, the 250 or the 252, whatever the R2D2 looking one
Yeah,
was.
250.
We, yeah, we had that flown out from New York
Really?
for the last week of mixes because
I had
Earth Song
forgotten
was
that.
like unrecallable without the 250 because it was on everything, including the
Sure.
vocal. So we flew out the 250, and that last night I was recalling Earth Song, and like to get it like perfect. Like that was the hardest part because Bruce and Michael, everybody on this project has the best years ever.
Right.
So you're recalling mixes from a year ago in a totally different studio with obviously a different console,
Different monitors, different
different
everything.
monitors, different gear, and you're trying to get it like, just spot on. And Bruce's whole like plus one over zero, plus 1.5 over zero, like that whole thing,
Right.
like getting it dialed in, like those were my technical, kind of nightmares. But I think you're thinking of history.
Uh, Go ahead and talk about history, but no, what I really want to talk about is the R. Kelly song.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, yeah, this is the insanity, right? Stuff that so history of the track is so big that it's going to require four 48 track digital machines, four Sonys.
Yep.
And you could lock two of them together with no issues, just setting an address on the remotes, tie them together, and they lock. But Michael told Jimmy and Steve Hodge, and Bruce that he wanted everything live. You couldn't do submixes.
Right.
So
Well, you know where we
we
learned
had to,
that. We
yeah,
we did that on the song Jam.
exactly.
Yeah, Jam.
So
So we'd already done it.
so we Andrew, right, the mastermind is behind this, and he's like, well,
Right.
we could lock in with SMPTE, but there's going to be drift and there's going to be issues. So somebody puts in a call to Sony. This is at Larrabee. They call Sony and say, hey, we need to lock up four 3348s. Is this
Hmm.
possible? And they're like, we don't know. We need to call the tech, like the guy who wrote the software. So meanwhile, Andrew goes to work and he gets them all four to lock. So in studio, the front room at Larrabee, we've got the two 48s, and in the back room at Larrabee, we've got two more 48s, and that console submixers are feeding the front room console.
Yep.
So the whole thing can be live. So Bruce is mixing. Steve's in one room, Bruce is in the other room. Michael's running back and forth, and the guy from Sony calls back and says, "I'm really sorry, it's not possible." So, I mean, that's the magic of Andrew. This is all Sheps
Yeah.
doing that. And then the "You're Not Alone," Michael sings it, the choir sings it, the orchestra's on there, everybody's done, and Michael says, "Oh, I really want the outro to modulate,
Yep.
at every chorus." And this is pre Pro Tools, right? So we have like H3000, the H4000, the Synclavier. What was that other old machine that
The
used to do
Publison.
Publison?
No, we
We had
rented like 12 Publisons or something.
yeah, the Lexicon one. Lexicon had
The
a pitch
2400. Yeah.
2400. We had
Yep.
all of them, and it was like we would run it a pass through and be like, "Oh, this one sounds better on the 4000. Let's use that. Oh, the strings sound better in the Publison. Use that. Oh, the vocals better in the whatever." So we transposed every section of that song, but you had to know which machine was going to transpose the vocals, the keyboards, the strings better to get into that. And it was all the offsets again,
Oh,
Oh,
you know, and it was just a nightmare. But that was like me, Brian, Bruce, Eddie. I mean, that was like everybody in one room,
yeah.
trying to like stir the pot and get this thing. But that's what you hear on the record, like it's done, so it's there.
Hmm. I'm going to toss in Little Susie. Uh, Putting that intro together for Little Susie, uh, it, it was a technical challenge, but it was so much fun.
Yeah.
Tearing that music box apart, sampling the tines, all the clocks, the footsteps. Michael's very theatrical. It's very much almost a movie type intro. I think you hear Michael's voice for the first time in that song at about 2 minutes and 6 seconds. That's just incredibly courageous that you're going to put that much of an intro before the artist actually says, "Okay, now it's my turn." He loved drama. He loved anticipation. And all right, we've got so many. I got to keep pushing here. Um, Andy Healy asks, I like this question. How did the vibe change from room to room or producer to producer? Were there any rooms you loved working in or any session that crystallized what the experience was like? We've already kind of touched on this, but um, Matt, you had kind of a unique perspective. How did the vibe change kind of going from room to room, different
Totally,
producers?
totally. Because there was I spent time in three with working with um, Bruce's pal Renee
Renee.
on some of that stuff, and it was like you would walk into one room. I mean, like Bruce had Studio 4,
Yeah.
and everybody knew that was Bruce's room. That was where Bruce was going to do his whatever mixing he was going to do. And I remember when we had to move the little office out of the vocal booth so that then Michael could actually do a vocal
Right.
in Studio 4. And that was one vibe. And then Studio 3 was like a completely different thing because we had the most outrageous stack of speakers. Was it?
Augsburger.
Were Tony? You were talking about the fact about subs in New
Yeah.
York.
They were
Yeah.
bass bends basically for, like Augsburger bass bends.
Well, no. Prior to that, we had those tannoys. And like if you had
I didn't see
two
that.
of the
Yeah.
monster tannoys in a speaker
Yeah. Those hot, yeah,
in
the
studio,
hot
you had
heads or
you had
whatever
a
they were
huge
called.
monitor, and we had four of them. We had them stacked on top of each other and subs. I mean, it was like walking into a room that was full of a wall of speaker.
Yeah.
And that was one vibe. And then if you walked into Studio One, of course, that was a whole another thing because that was like the string dates, which
Spring
was just
Central.
magnificent. And then there was what was the other room in the middle? Was it three?
Two,
Two.
Studio Two, the
Yeah, we
Neve,
didn't use
John
two very
Lennon's
much, did
Neve.
we?
Nah.
Well, no, the person who used two was Bill Bottrell. And when Bill came, and when we did, he did a bunch of the stuff with Slash. Bill was in two.
I was there. No, I was in two with Eddie and Slash
Yeah,
It's
me
for
it's
too.
Slash too. Okay, yeah, and
yeah,
Bill was
Yeah.
there
because I fell asleep
at one
punching
point too,
in.
I think.
I'll never forget that. Slash caught me
Yeah,
falling
but I
asleep.
mean, it was like you would walk through.
You know what
Well,
was interesting
yeah, but
as we were talking about the vibes is that like what was very different because back then you could
yeah,
smoke in the studios. There was no smoke or drinking in any of those rooms, which was like
Unheard.
very unusual for back then.
Yeah.
Right.
94 was like every room had a different smell,
Right.
um, and different array of bottles. This had none of that. No cigarettes, no nothing. I mean, which was kind of a relief, especially considering
Yeah.
the amount of hours we were doing.
Right. Rob, for
But the,
you, roaming from, did you have a favorite room you like to work in, or one one that you didn't want to
I
work in?
just, honestly, like back then, I loved the studio. I loved
Yeah,
the Hit Factory. Like we
yeah,
were talking about the hours, but like the honest to God truth is I didn't want to leave.
yeah,
I left because I needed new clothes and I had to shower, but like I loved being in the rooms. There was
yeah.
just nothing better in the world. And
Hmm.
every room had its purpose. If you're
Right.
going to do strings, there was no better room in the world to be in Studio One. I was just like, I was in heaven. I mean, I was a kid. I was 24. It was my first big record. It was just like,
Yeah.
fuck, this is amazing. Like every day, But I think the cool thing, the interesting thing was the change in vibe from New York to LA, right? Like New York, the Hit Factory was like Fort Knox.
Yeah.
It was like everything was locked, everything was protected, nobody was allowed back in the studio. And we get to record one. I remember walking in that first morning, and it's like everybody's walking through the room and the runners are in there and the cleaning people are in there. And I'm like, we were locked down for a year. What the hell just happened?
Right.
So
Mhm.
it was such a different vibe, and I think it was probably needed to finish the record. To
Okay.
have the living room and the kitchen, um, and I ended up spending so much time in that front room at Record One on the
Right.
huge SSL with Bruce and Michael. Much of that time, with Michael listening to the volume just dying to me sitting in the back of the room with my ears,
No, not
closed.
not to correct you. Back then, no, it was still the Big Neve.
Yeah, no, no, no. It was a big SSL in the front room.
Oh, in studio.
The
Okay,
back
the
room,
room by the
studio
reception.
Studio
It
B
was
or
called.
Studio Two was the Neve.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, they used to have an API in there or something. You're
Yeah,
right. They
no,
did
that
put an
that
SSL
front room was at the time it was the biggest. It was whatever the 96 channel or
right,
104
and
channel,
the
whatever it
Big Neve was
was.
still in the back.
Yeah, and then we put the Augsburgers, in front of
Yep.
Alan's beautiful wall,
Yeah.
which he just would walk in the morning and be like,
What
I
have
don't
you
know what's going on
done?
here, guys. What have you done? Like he
Right.
was so like perturbed by that. Um, yeah, so LA was just a different, and Larrabee was even more relaxed, if that was possible. I mean, we had a hoop in the front parking lot. We'd play
Right.
horse with Jimmy Jam, and take breaks and play basketball and order Fat Burger. The Jimmy special: chili cheese fries, chili cheese dog, and a chili cheese burger.
Oh, Fat Burger.
Yeah.
And I mean,
So
to be clear for the people listening, the rooms were secure. I mean, we were behind gates. I mean, it
yeah,
was,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
but it was just like New York really felt
No, I agree. I
tight.
think so. To turn it around, when I left LA, like after the Dangerous project or Quincy's project, and then I go to New York, and I'm meeting with Eddie Germano and Troy Germano, and they're putting in. I mean, yeah, they turned it into Fort Knox, and I was kind of, but Michael had been through a pretty rough time, so I wasn't fighting it at all. But I was like, I don't know if we have to be this extreme, but that's how they got it done. And they
Yeah.
knew it was for me it was a very different vibe because I'm way more LA and but it was fun. And I think I've always said the History album sounds like New York. It to me the
Yeah.
musicianship, the vibe of it is way more New York than LA.
Yeah.
So
I could see that.
Can I throw Tony under the bus with a security story?
absolutely.
So somehow we ended up with a rare night off. I don't know what happened, but Tony's like, "Hey man, let's go get a beer." So we go to the Raccoon Lodge. Do you remember that place on the Upper West Side?
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. Yeah,
We're standing at the bar, and
I lived on the West Side.
we've signed confidentiality contracts. We're like we're the CIA. Like everything mum's the word. And we start talking to these two girls, and they're like, "So what do you guys do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a recording engineer." And Tony's like, "I work with Michael Jackson."
I
just,
didn't, I never actually signed my agreement.
he just like, and they're like, they turn their backs on me. They're like, "Really? Tell us." Like, I
Really?
mean,
I didn't know
it
I'd
was.
worked that one. Yeah,
Oh man, you were good. You just dropped it right there.
dropped it right in there.
It was
Did I
amazing.
mention Michael?
Can I throw in a comment?
Yeah,
Uh,
please.
it's this is totally uh, Rob, your comment is so spot on in the way it was. I remember Brad, you saying how the whole confidentiality thing about no one had to know that Michael was there and working, and Brad Buxer would walk to the studio every day wearing his dangerous tour jacket.
That's crazy. Yeah,
Right? No, that's not what I want to say. Here's the thing: we had all at one time all four of the Hit Factory rooms in the Hit Factory building. We had at one time one or the other or both of the studio rooms across the street at the Sony
Sony.
studio building. And we also had in the old Hit Factory, there were two other rooms at the old Hit Factory building because Teddy Riley was in one and then somebody else was in another one. And I remember what rooms they were, but I remember I was engineering for somebody in one of those rooms when Teddy Riley
Yeah.
was across the hall in one of the other rooms. So that was in New York. We had at one point up to 8 rooms occupied and
Yeah.
running, all with different engineers and producers. And Steve Porcaro was in some little cubby hole of a closet or something, and he was doing something that he was doing on an equipment setup. And then we moved to LA, and we take over Record One and Larrabee North. So this was one of those projects that there was no shortage of studio rooms and stories, and each room was a unique vibe.
Well, not just that, but we also, we had Jimmy and Terry at Flight Time.
Yeah.
We had Dallas Austin down in Atlanta.
That's right. Yeah.
We had Teddy in Virginia Beach. I mean, he was coming back and forth. I mean, this was way before you could send files. We were literally putting tapes in boxes and shipping them FedEx. The
Hmm.
FedEx charges alone on that project had to be tens of thousands of dollars
The whole
just
record budget.
yeah, just shuttling tapes back and forth.
And Bruce was never shy. He'd be like, I remember we were going to record one of the opera voices on one of the songs, which easily could have been done in any of the rooms we were already paying for. He's like,
Right.
"Nope, this has to be done at Studio 2 at Western." It was just like, all right, here we go. We're gonna move everything across town for like literally like a 3 minute, vocal.
Oh man.
Um, but that's also what's so special, is Michael understanding, I want to do these backgrounds in the Studio One. This opera voice needs to be done in this room.
Right.
The choir needs to be done at Westlake Studio D, like those kinds of like special moments, because we would never do those things today.
Right.
Hmm.
All right. One question is, did you ever get a feeling in a session that this song is something special? And what song was it for you? I know Matt talked about Smile, but kind of for all three of you, what song did you work on that you just knew this is bananas? This is going to be around for a long time.
All right. I guess it was like a toss up between Stranger in Moscow and You Are Not Alone. I mean, You Are Not Alone was sort of like an obvious because it was more of a pop tune, and his vocal was so cool on it. But Stranger in Moscow had like like a like you said, sort of like a theatrical thing or like a very visual story to it. And that one stuck out to me. I like the orchestration to it and the arrangement and all that.
Hmm. Rob?
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because my first whatever experience with Stranger in Moscow was hearing it at Sony. So my first month or however long that was, the beginning of my Michael sessions was Bruce and Renee. So we were working on Too Bad, what the song that becomes Too Bad, and a lot of other tracks, tracks that nobody's ever heard before, just to fuel the rumor mill. There's probably 20 Renee songs out there, um, maybe more. And then Michael comes, Matt is ensconced in Sony with Brad, and for whatever reason, we were shuttling tapes back and forth, and stuff was starting to move between the studios. And I really have a vivid memory of the first time walking into that Sony studio with all the lights out, Brad behind his synthesizer throne, and Matt at the
Right.
front console, you know, with the beginning of Stranger in Moscow playing.
Hmm.
And like I think that was the real moment that had hit me like I'm on a Michael Jackson record. Like
Right.
at that up until that moment, they were cool tracks. Too Bad becomes amazing, but it was like working with a songwriter, and the songwriter happens to be best friends with Bruce Swedien. And like that's
Right.
cool and awesome and amazing. But as soon as I walked into that studio and heard Stranger in
Hmm.
Moscow, it just took on a different life. Um, so that song and Earth Song, the second I heard Earth Song, I was like, oh man, this is. And I ended up working with everybody who played on Earth Song, even Bill Ross did the orchestration. In my future production career, I ended up working with all of them and hiring Bill to do orchestrations for me because that song just impacted like the rest of my music career.
Hmm. Matt, which one stands out for you?
Well, there's actually two that stand out for me, and for a different reason. Um, both because I was the first person who ever heard and ever recorded Earth Song, and They Don't Care About Us.
Right.
And I did that work in Westlake Studio C prior to the Decade Project becoming the Dangerous Project. I mean, I saw those songs in their embryonic form when
Right.
Michael was just starting to conceive them. And I saw that process. And then how many years later is it? I'm in New York and I'm getting to see the fruition of
Right.
all of the other things that have come together to create what those songs ultimately became. I was like, oh my God, these are epic. I don't think anyone else felt that epic quality quite like I had experienced it because what they both of those songs became were such incredible statements from Michael.
Right.
And just to have been kind of on board that vehicle as it traveled through time and then seeing where it ended up in the end, to me was just an incredible feeling.
Hmm. I hate to mimic Rob and Tony, but I'm going to go with Stranger also. Buxer and I have a different memory of this. Um, I remember it clearly, and Buxer says that my memory is wrong. But in late January of '94, that's when Buxer's gear showed up. And I was at Hit Factory at 421, and it was snowing. I remember it clearly. I've lost entire chunks of my memory over the years, but I remember this night clearly. Cartage showed up and started bringing Buxer's gear in into Studio 3. And me and Buxer, I went outside and I'm kind of watching the key. Didn't they roll them in through the garage door, whatever it was? They'd roll gear in.
That
Um,
elevator door, yeah.
yeah, the elevator door. And then Buxer and I went into Studio 3, and he had the DAT, kind of, it might have been the one that he did in Moscow, and played the demo for me. And that's when I called Bruce in LA, and I held the phone up for Bruce, and I said, "You're going to melt when you hear this song." And Bruce had me play it for him twice. And yeah, it's just always been a really special song for me, and watching it come to life and what Michael did with it. But that was literally my first, I don't know if it's my first day in New York, but and we all have slightly different memories. But I know I was there late January loading Buxer in, and that was the first time I heard it. So, all right, I'm going to jump on to a couple Facebook questions. Savannah Brock asks, was there a song on the album that you felt unsure of or felt didn't fit on the album? I have one right away, but uh, let's. I've got three guys looking up into space. I'm going to go ahead and do mine. I'm going to say DS. I just, I didn't love DS. I understood what Michael was trying to do. Um, I just didn't I just wasn't a fan. And I love Michael. I love that he had to kind of vent some really angry frustration, but that one was not that one in my mind could have been swapped out with some of the other stuff we worked on. But Tony, what do you think?
I don't really know if I have enough like contact with all the songs to say like, okay, I didn't think that one should make it, you know? I just I was like kind of it was a blur. I don't know, I have no idea. I'm just being honest. I can't really think of a song that I thought that the energy of some of the songs I found to be it was a peculiar time in music too with the way things were sort of evolving from hip hop was really taking root then,
Right.
that 90s hip hop thing, and Michael was sort of going there a little bit. I felt like everything felt like it belonged. I didn't feel like there were some songs that couldn't even tell you what they were, that I do remember from different other contributors that didn't make the album that I thought should have.
Right.
There was a lot of those where I was like, man, that's a good one. And all of a sudden it was like it was gone.
I
And
mean,
you're like,
they're gonna ask, is there one that sticks out in your mind, or you just don't
there was
remember?
like a bunch of babyface collaborations that were amazing. Amazing.
Okay.
And they hit the bin. I don't
Yeah.
know. You know.
Rob, anyone that you were kind of scratching your head?
I know there's going to be some faction of Michael Jackson fans that are going to be angry no matter what song we
Right.
say. But for me, I had to look it up, Tony. I went to the track list. Come Together, you're on hallowed ground
Mm.
with the Beatles. I know Brad's a non-Beatle fan, but like I'm always like it takes a lot to like cross genres, to
Did you say
have
I'm not a Beatle fan or Bucks are?
you weren't back in the day. You're
Well,
like, I don't get it.
Yeah, yeah, I'll agree.
But like it takes so much to cross genres with a famous song,
Right.
and like sometimes like when somebody who's not a rock guy tries to do a rock song, it just sounds like a wedding band,
Right.
or and same thing if like a country artist tries to do a hip hop song, it just like it doesn't quite gel the way the original does. And for me, like Come Together does that. Michael's brilliant, and everybody who worked on that's
Yeah.
amazing, but it just kind of it was a last minute, it had been recorded earlier,
Hmm.
it was brought into the project towards the end to kind of fill out some story, and it just never got me. But the other song, the newer song that I never really liked This Time Around. I just didn't feel like there was good energy. It didn't. It hits a level and it just kind of stays there. And like
Hmm.
for Michael and his epicness and his grandness, to me it never delivered.
Fair enough. Matt, and any of the history songs that didn't gel with you 100%?
I cannot pick one out because to me it was like someone was making a stew and the ingredients they were putting in were so completely unrelated in terms of the collection of material overall. It was like the collection of songs on that record was just all over the map.
Right.
And that's not to say that that was a bad thing. I understand that was part of what Michael was going for, but um, I it's hard, and in retrospect, I mean, yes, DS maybe is a kind of a little bit less uh, statement wise. It's got less of a hook than because when I hear Scream, it's just like it still knocks me over.
Right.
When I hear the groove on this time around, I think it's an amazing performance. And yet there's all these different things, and then Smile comes into the mix, and it's just like I just don't know of an album that had that much diversity.
Oh, totally agree.
And it was like, how do you say? It's kind of like when people would ask me, what was my favorite song on any record album that I worked on? It was always like, well, that kind of changes over time.
Right.
Because when you've sat in a room and heard the same song for months at a time at incredibly high decibel levels, it's like I just cannot tolerate hearing that song. It's
Right.
not that I don't like the song, it's just that my tolerance level is different. So there wasn't one in particular that I had that kind of feeling for.
All right. So Alyssa Kennett is asking, while in the studio, was Michael the youthful, childlike person we imagine, or while he was at work, was he more focused and serious? Did you ever feel that he could be uh, childlike sometimes?
I never got the vibe that he was. I thought, I my whole impression was that he liked being in the studio. He liked being around the crew, and he was electrified by music. I mean, there was definitely something that came over him where there was no. We're also talking about a different time. There was no other distractions, but there was no cell phones, there was no social media, there was no
Right.
anything. But you're talking about it was 1000% laser focused on the joy of making something great. That seemed to be the whole challenge that he was always into, was like pushing it to try and come up with something a little bit further. And it was in a playful way. He was looking
Right.
for, He was looking for something super cool that he had never heard before. I mean, that was constantly the the mantra was like, I want to hear something like I've never heard before, type of thing. It was
But when he heard,
it was a joyful thing for him. There was no doubt. I never saw him look unhappy in the studio.
I mean, you're serious when you say that, right?
Serious, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
um, and I'll ask both you guys. But yeah, when Michael came into the studio, I mean, my memory, he was always upbeat,
Yeah.
always greeted you, quite often greeted you with a hug, and he just loved being there.
Yeah.
I think almost like Rob was saying, I think for Michael's whole life, the studio was just his safe place and a place that he just loved being.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Never looked unhappy in the
That's
studio.
no,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Rob, same question. Just kind of Michael's demeanor day to day.
Yeah, it was always fun. Like it was never a chore, even when he, had to do like some of those marathon vocal sessions he did. Like, I never saw him angry. The angriest he ever got was the pie incident, and he laughed about that too. So it's like the guy just, as much pressure as he had in the outside world, like I couldn't handle what he was living
Right,
outside. And yeah, no, he was always happy and always willing, always wanting to play practical jokes and laugh at people and laugh with people. Like that was it, you know.
right.
And unbelievably polite. Like I said, like it was just like,
Yeah.
Michael, I gotta read one tape. Okay, thank you. Everything was a thank you. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Right.
Like you want another track? Yeah, thank you. Like,
Yeah.
all right, it's cool. It was like Rob is saying, there was never any pressure as far as that goes. I mean, it was never, I couldn't see, there was never really any temper tantrums regarding music amongst anybody. And I think, that trends comes down from Michael. And like you're saying, the pressure, I mean, just think about the pressure of making a record after making Thriller and Dangerous. It's like, that's got to be on your mind if you're
Right.
him. Like,
Right.
people are expecting an MJ record,
Right.
it's not some garbage thing.
And even when something went wrong, like if we had technical issues, because
It's
stuff
got,
happens,
yeah,
we're pushing boundaries every day, and like, the air conditioner breaking, whatever it was, when Bruce will say, well, I'm sorry, we can't do this today, or, can you come back later or tomorrow? And he'd be like, oh, really? Okay.
Okay.
yeah,
Like, and you'd work with another artist and like the microphone or the headphones would whatever squeak or something and it like they'd fly off the handle. Like Tony and
Right.
I both had sessions with people where they were just maniacs. And Michael was like, no matter what, it was like, okay, thanks. See you tomorrow. Then he'd go to Hungary for 2 weeks, but he'd
Right.
come back eventually and, and record. I'll never forget those moments. Like, I'll see you guys tomorrow. And then we're like, next day you're sitting there in the studio watching TV, waiting for him to show up. And he like gets off the plane in Europe. And you're like, I
Right.
guess we're not doing vocals today.
hmm
Got to
But
go visit some kids in Hungary in the
yeah,
hospital. Matt, same question. Just you've got decades with Michael. Just general demeanor, especially when he's in the studio.
Oh no, I totally agree. There were two places that Michael was most comfortable. One was in the studio being creative, and the other one was on stage in front of an audience. Those two places, he was in his comfort zone and he was just enjoying the moment. Now, specific to your question, there were two different modes that I would see Michael in. One was when he was really lighthearted and playful and having fun, and that was tempered with the other side of Michael was when he was working on the music because Michael never took himself serious and he would joke, he would be a jokester, he would laugh, play tricks, that part of it, absolutely. But when he it came to the music, he was dead serious.
Right.
He was totally focused on what had to happen musically. And it wasn't kind of in an obsessive way, but in a extremely focused, very patient, very measured, but you could tell his focus and his dedicated nature of being serious about the actual music was like total. It like took over his whole being. The same way that we all know when Michael would laugh and find something funny, he's one of those guys that would give such a giant belly laugh and then double over in laughter because he would so in the moment of just being so joyous and happy. To me, there was that joyous, fun thing, and then there was that super serious. I'm doing the music now, and I'm focused
Right.
on that. But at the same time, I mean, it was light. It wasn't like heavy duty serious. It would be like, no, he'd joke with you and laugh, and if something would happen, he'd say, oh, we need another, or he would take it in stride. Never, ever an angry moment or a moment of frustration.
All right, I'm gonna there's gonna be a light at the end of the tunnel. I've got like three more that I think are really good questions. There's a lot of great questions, but and these are going to be quick. This one, the first one's kind of interesting. Aside from Michael, who were you excited to be in a session with? I think that's a good set. That's a good question.
I mean, the cast of characters is unbelievable. Janet, Jimmy, Terry, David Foster, Babyface, Steve
Well,
Porcaro,
even
David
outside of
Page.
MJ, even outside of MJ world, was there somebody else that you were just
Oh, you
like,
mean outside our sessions?
yeah, yeah, or either
I mean,
or?
I've been really lucky. Like Phil Collins, to pull up that I remember just pulling up that first fader on the Phil Collins vocal and just having another one of those moments of like, oh my God, I can't
Right.
believe I'm doing this. Quincy, Quincy
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I just feel really lucky. I've had a good, a lot of good
Yeah.
contact with incredible singers and artists.
Matt?
Oh my gosh. This is such a tough question
Oh, I know.
because when you are a professional and you walk into the environment and you walk into the studio, you put on your professional hat and you say, "This is my job. I'm going to do the best job I can." And to me, everyone who I've ever worked with becomes equal.
Right.
Um, from being in the room with Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney and oh my gosh, George Martin, and Quincy and Jeff Emmerich in the Thriller, and then Eddie Van Halen, and then all of the other people along the way. And on History, it was, I think some of the other people had some more individual encounters that were a little bit more exciting than mine because you and I both did so much administrative work
Right.
and managerial tasks. But it's just like, yeah, Quincy, just these people that are just phenomenal.
Legends. Yeah.
And you only understand this feeling with the perspective of all of the years that have gone by.
Right. Right. Well, that question's coming up. So um, before I let Tony answer, I'm going to jump in. And there have been, like all four of us, just thousands of just crazy moments that are just seared in your memory. For me, I would say Ray Charles. Being in the studio with Ray and Quincy and the camaraderie and the love and the jokes and the just dirtiest jokes you ever heard in your life out of Ray Charles. Um, but that was, I mean, in my mind, I was like 6 years old. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to claim to be some huge Ray Charles fan or something. It's just this is a voice and a talent from my childhood. And those moments are really cool when it's like, this is pure magic that I'm experiencing right now. So working with him on Quincy's Back on the Block album is one of many, but in a short conversation, it stands out. Mr. Black.
Mr. Black. It's interesting that for me in that all of my like crazy memories or like moments were with artists who were not yet legends.
Right.
Um, so like, from the Notorious B.I.G. and Little Kim's first record and Cameron, and then moving into like Alicia Keys. Alicia Keys, when I met her, she was a 20-year-old girl
Hmm.
that, didn't have her first record out yet.
Right.
And I was cutting vocals with her, and I wound up working with her for the next 5 years. But in between that, like the one person that really stand out to me was I got to work with several times cutting vocals with Luther Vandross.
Hmm.
And that was one of those vocals where he was not like I wasn't like some Luther Vandross aficionado, but I knew who he was. But when he got on the microphone, it was kind of like one of those things where you're like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
that's that guy. Even Rob's girl, Christina, when I recorded her on a track that Alicia produced, I was like, whoa. I mean, this girl will never starve. Like
Right.
that vocal
She can
is,
sing.
she kind of scared Alicia because Alicia was in the room and she was like, is she really loud? I was like, I'm trying to be sensitive to Alicia. I'm like, yeah, it's crazy. Like, I gotta adjust some things, you know what I mean? Like I'm
Right.
diving for the mic pre and stuff. But a lot of those artists that I worked with weren't. Now it's kind of like, yeah, that turned into that and that turned into that and that. Those things don't make any sense to me because these
Right.
kids that like, some of them are kids, but like they come on my YouTube channel and they're like fascinated with like this record or that record. And I was like, listen, man, I didn't even know what I was doing
Right.
when I was mixing Ghostface Killer. I barely knew what I was doing. Like those records would sound a lot different now. I said, but to be honest with you, like we all didn't know what we were doing. It was like a collision of like young art engineers working with hip hop characters who had never been in big studios. They didn't know what to ask for, and like that sort of like hip hop style of sort of bad became a thing that
Right.
everyone's chasing 30 years later.
Right.
That's kind of weird.
Cool. All right. We're gonna do about two more. Um, I like this one. If you could go back, I mean, I struggle with this concept in my brain all the time. If you could go back to one moment that you'd want to relive, it's the wording of this is a little complicated, but I understand what it is. If you could go back to one moment in the studio, and we'll bring it back to the History album. If you could go back to one moment in the studio on the History album, which one would it be, and would you do anything differently?
I just want to be in the studio all day, every day with Janet Jackson.
Wow.
Just,
Okay.
I mean, Janet, apart from her just incredible talent, of course, was like if Michael was nice, Janet was like sugary, like she was the syrup on top of nice,
Right.
and like the most polite person. Like, I mean, it was such a great day to be with them, and I have this like imprinted in my brain is this moment, like Tony, you're trying not to like look at people, but you got to pay attention and all of that. And she was on one side of the studio and I was on the other, and I just happened to look up and she was I don't know if she was staring at me, but she was staring in
Oh,
my direction.
right.
Maybe there was a clock above my head or something. But I just kind of like caught her eye, and she looked at me, and she blushed and looked away, and I was just like, "Oh my God! Like, what do I even do with a moment like that?" And then I worked with her and Jimmy a couple of years later doing a vocal at John Van Ness's, and it was like a nice homecoming, and she was again just so sweet and so amazing. So I
Right.
just feel like, yeah, let me relive that day every day. That's fine.
Hmm. Tony,
What was how did it go again, the
well, the
question?
question is,
If you could relive
yeah,
something
if you
from
could go
history.
back to like one day on the history project, or what event would you do or maybe do differently?
There's, I mean, you always have regrets on like, man, we should have like done this a little bit more or that a little
Right.
bit more or a little bit, maybe a little bit more of learning. It was so good in retrospect. Like I didn't know while we were doing it that it was the coolest thing
Right.
ever. It just, it was just a whirlwind that you got sucked into and you were in it. But I came out of that a completely different person from the experience of just all of it uh, on a technical level, and then also all the interpersonal stuff. I mean, I could tell you this. I mean, I hope Eddie sees this, but like Eddie had a big effect on me forward that
Hmm.
I didn't know that I was taking in while I was working with him. His demeanor and how he handled people and didn't let things get a little out of, he was in charge, but he didn't like throw shit around in the room. And those kind of things were the things that I'll always look back on as far as reliving them, and the camaraderie and the laughs. I mean, we had a lot of laughs, and making music and learning how to do all kinds of unbelievably complicated things that are so easy now.
Right.
It's frightening, to make a record now with the technology that we have, like that I have here in my studio, is so much easier than what we were dealing with on an
Right.
hourly basis there. And we had it top of everything at that time. But it was just that learning experience of mentally trying to solve problems all the time was something that I would always go back and relive because it helps you when you go forward.
Right.
That's my answer.
Okay. Matt, any moment from the history album that you would like to go back, relive, maybe do something different?
Okay, there was a movie, and it was a big successful movie called My Favorite Year.
Mm-hmm.
I got to live, I got to live that
Mm.
in my own life. And I tell people, if you see the movie My Favorite Year, it's all about these. I think it was based on the show of shows from the 1950s, and they're going to have this big gigantic movie star on, and then the movie star arrives, and for the first moment in everyone's reality, he realizes, you mean this show goes out live? Because he's a film actor where he
Right.
gets endless numbers of takes. And I just, there was the whole thing about it was a production, it was a crew of people, it was a TV show, and it was the interpersonal relationships. And I just say, I got to live that movie in my own life, and I would call it my favorite year, just like the title of the movie, because the moments that I cherished were the moments that, uh, sometimes I would share them with you. I shared it with, I think, both you guys when, it was time to leave the studio, and we'd all just go out and we'd be walking down the street. And we're in New York City.
Right.
And I would never want to take a car unless the weather was horrendous because I got to walk across Manhattan. And Brad, you and I got to go to the lighting of the Christmas tree in
Rockefeller Center.
Rockefeller Center, which was like one of the most intense,
We almost died.
memorable moments of my life because we didn't know if we were going to survive. and live. We thought
We literally almost died. I've never
we
seen anything like
almost
it.
we almost did, because if sardines feel compressed in a can, then we were compressed more than that,
Yeah,
in literally in Rockefeller Center. And these other moments that were just like, I was in the greatest city in the world, and I was every if I had a day off, I would just go out and I would hit the streets and I would walk. I would pick a direction and say, today I'm walking in this direction. And I only would occasionally get a day off that I could do that.
right.
But it was the most phenomenal, taken together. It was just the most phenomenal experience. I never imagined going into that it would could ever possibly be, and the friendships and the people and the camaraderie working in the studio.
Well, I'm so glad you said it that way because I was gonna basically do the same kind of schmaltzy thing. Um, yeah, working with Michael was amazing, and I'm not diminishing that in the least. But after, I showed up there early 1994 and spent, back and forth. Me and Matt were swapping in and out for the next 16 months or so, 16, 17 months, whatever it was. And I totally agree. I agree with everything you just said. Walking the streets of New York on Sundays, I would sometimes get up early and take the train out to Coney Island because I'm weird, and just have a cup of coffee out there and watch the sunrise. And meeting you guys, not to get all schmaltzy again, but what an amazing people that don't get to experience things that we got to experience. I'm not trying to sound like a big shot, but the camaraderie. Once you fit into that team and that trust was built, and you've got Michael at the middle of it all, but Bruce and Eddie and Buxer being all Buxer, and it was just this perfect dysfunctional family. And I didn't want it to end. I mean, I remember when that album started ticking down, and I'm like, I do not want this to end. Can we please, do, sides 3 and 4 and just keep going? So I totally agree. Um, Andy asks that, we're all going to suck at this one, but what one word summarizes the whole experience for you? I mean, I guess we just kind of said that, but Tony, could you boil it down to one word?
Is life changing one word? I mean, it definitely changed my life. I mean, I came out of that thing an absolute monster dragon engineer. Like all of a sudden, I had the stamp on my forehead. Like you worked on the Michael Jackson thing, and you're valid. It changed me completely. I
That's
went
amazing.
from you know, it. Bruce said it when I first met him. It's like, Tony, you're not going to believe what happens to the studio after this session's here. It'll be busy, So, and he sort of said to me, he's like, and you're gonna like, do this and that. And I was like, yeah, okay, and I just agreed with everything with these, I
Right.
was not going to say to him like, I don't think so, but he couldn't have been more right. It was, you know, created a monster. I mean, I came out of that thing obnoxious, more obnoxious than I went into it.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
Right.
Rob,
I mean, one word is, I mean, yeah, life changing, transforming. How's that for one
Yeah.
word?
okay.
Um, you know, like I want to say like extravagant, but not in the sense of like it's the wrong word, but the idea that as everybody has said, like there was one goal, right? To make something the ear has never heard before, right?
Right.
And within that, we had carte blanche, So when I say extravagance, it's not to mean that everything was gold tinted or something, but it was like you could never duplicate that literally ever again, where
Right.
the
Right.
goal is this team of people who are here to create a product with Michael Jackson, who can make any phone call in the world to get any musician, any guest we want to show up in any studio we want in the world,
Right.
to make sure that that moment is perfect. I was going to say perfection, but he didn't want perfection,
No,
right? He wanted
real.
reality,
Yep.
realness. But like, yeah, so I don't know what that word is. It's not extravagance, but it's that endless ability to create something magical.
Love it. Mr. Forger?
I think my last comment wrapped it up. I mean, it was you know, my favorite year. That there isn't anything in my life. There's only one other moment in my life, and that was working with Paul and George Martin and Quincy and that team when we tracked The Girl's
Right.
Mind. That was a phenomenal date. But it was like, no, I got to. I got it was my favorite year. I got to have an experience that was just beyond belief. And I agree with Rob. It wasn't extravagant in the way. It was just that you had unimaginable or unlimited resources to construct that thing that you were working on. And it was like to be able to access something because it was all Michael's vision. And it was all
Mhm.
to the end of let's get Michael's vision down on tape, the way he's hearing it, the way he wants it to be presented. And it was just such a fun journey to be part of.
Hmm.
I'll give you one crazy thing because I see it behind you.
Yeah.
That's the only album I ever bothered to get a plaque for. I don't have any plaques. I have I got the Grammy Award thing with Alicia, but I don't even have a plaque from Alicia's records.
Okay.
I only have that history plaque. I was never big on the plaques, but I was like, well, how are you going to outdo that one? And
Right.
also, you know what I mean? But like that one is special, and it out. There's no way to outdo that session. It's
Right.
it's it's almost a nightmare in some ways because there was no. You had to get over it at a certain
Yeah.
point, you know, and that
Well,
was not easy.
and that's a conversation that I've had with Brad Buxer and probably Matt and different people. But Buxer and I in particular have talked about it. Where do you go from here? Yeah, you do have to kind of realign a little bit and
Yeah,
refocus because it just what happened then just won't
yeah.
happen again.
Every story you tell is like you're from another planet. Like yeah. We used to order $1,000 worth of food, and we had every tape machine known to man. And what? Where are all the tapes? The
There
hundreds of reels,
there's hundreds of reels
hundreds.
that are in Michael's estate's library
It's crazy.
and half the questions that I haven't asked tonight are what's happening with all these unreleased songs, who's going to release the songs, blah blah blah, and that's not my monkey, not my circus. So my one word would be gratitude. And it extends to Michael, it extends to you guys. This project, I'm filled with gratitude, and and I get to tell these stories once in a while and try and give people just a glimpse of what it was like. And the fact, and I'm actually being serious, the fact that the four of us who met, I met Matt in 85, I think, 84, 85, and you
Wow.
two I met in 94.
Yeah,
And we don't, we live in different parts of the country, but, we don't hang out. But you guys jumped onto this. Like I said, the four of us haven't been together, I think, since that party in that Japanese restaurant, which I still remember parts of. Um, but we're still friends.
yeah,
And the people that really spent a lot of time with Michael were just good people.
yeah.
And they brought different personalities, different backgrounds to the table. But I'm grateful. I'm a better person for working with you guys and for knowing you and for spending so much time with Michael. And so I'm filled with gratitude over the whole thing. So, any final thoughts for history's 30th?
Well, I totally agree with your sentiments, Brad. I look back on my whole career, and I have nothing but gratitude for having been blessed to have the experiences that I've had, and with all of the many people over the years. And this album was an exceptional, um, an exceptional time in I think everybody's life.
No question. Yeah, I mean, anytime anyone asks me about studio stuff and Michael Jackson and things like that, I mean, I give them an answer that they don't expect, I guess. And it's like, I'm like, it wasn't about the gear or anything. It was about the people. You know, they're like, what about the session? It's the people.
Right.
And, and that's some of the things that, we kind of get bummed out about with regards to the way the whole recording industry experience is now, is that these teams don't exist anymore,
Right.
and those teams were, it didn't matter if we had 24 track machines or D88s. It was the people that were like figuring it out and making the tracks, and the Steve Porcaros and all the musicians that were involved, the Brad Buxer. It's the people.
Yeah.
It's not anything else.
Yep. Rob, any final thoughts?
I think you all summed it up, but especially like this idea, like I'm just a better person for having been there. It fundamentally altered my personhood, like who I am,
Right.
not just in music, but how I act, how I work with people. Um, Even in this educational role, like I'm a producer. I find the best teacher for the best course, and I like put people together and I put teams together. And it's like in my research, I'm putting teams together, like and like the way that I mean, we all kind of just found each other. Like my being hired and Tony's being hired on that session was luck. It was
Right.
timing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you weren't looking through resumes going, well, this guy looks good, right? I mean, it was luck, but essentially, like I would say, like from that session forward, even though it's not recreatable, I'm always trying to recreate that level of professionalism, innovation, and creation in whatever I do.
Yeah.
I love that. I I lecture in a lot of recording schools, mostly in Europe. I have a little thing called studio etiquette on a Michael Jackson session, and it's a simple little talk, but it kind of boils down to don't cut corners. Be the best you can be. Push, 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 but know how to act in a session, and I learned all that from Michael, Quincy, Matt, Bruce, you guys, and it applies way beyond recording studios, just like Rob said. So no, we were at a very unique place at a unique time. So appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out for a while, and maybe we'll do this again and carry on. Thank you again. I will talk to you soon, and happy 30th anniversary to the History Project.
Yeah.
Take
Yes.
All
care,
right, boys.
guys.
Thank
Good
you.
night, guys.
Good
Bye
Good night.
now.
night. Great seeing everybody.
Same here.
Great seeing
Likewise.
you.
Take care.